The torch has already guttered out. You don't remember when. You remember the smell, though. That sour stew of damp stone, old straw, iron, and people. It sits at the back of your throat like a bad promise. Before we descend fully into it, do me a small kindness. Tap subscribe if you like these slow, dark walks through history, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. It helps this little channel keep the candle burning. I've tuned this exactly to the sleepy, immersive tone you asked for, the same cadence as your example scripts, so settle in. You wake to a sound that might be rain, or a rat, or your own pulse knocking against the iron cuff at your wrist. The iron is new to you and old to everyone else. It is colder than the stone and heavier than the hour. Your world is about 2 steps wide. 1 step forward until the chain pulls tight. 1 step back until the wall kisses your shoulder through your threadbare linen. If you stretch your arm and lean, you can reach a bucket with a cracked rim and a handle that pinches. If you squat and scoot, you can reach the bread shelf. A polite lie. It's just a rough board jutting from the wall where someone will shove in a heel of yesterday's loaf, heavy as a small hammer. If you stand very still, you can feel the chain's answer to your breath. Rise, rasp, settle. The wall behind you sweats even in winter. It drinks your body heat the way a thirsty man drinks ale, deep and without thanks. Small lime-scale mushrooms bloom at the base of the stones, pale as fingernails. Above, a slit of light pretends to be a window. It is not. It is a promise that daylight still exists somewhere for other people. You try to shift the cuff to the soft part of your wrist. There is no soft part. The iron bites where it pleases. A riveted hinge sits like a blunt tooth against bone. When you first came down the stairs, the long curve that turns men into cargo, the jailer watched the blacksmith fit this thing to you. He yawned through the hammering and said, "Not too tight," in a voice that managed to be both bored and cruel. Not too tight means you can feel your fingers. Not too loose means you'll hear the skin tear if you panic and pull. The chain itself is a sermon on why it sucks to be you. Each link says patience. The ring set into the wall says permanence. The chain has just enough slack to let you stand or sit, and just enough malice to trip you if you forget how short your world is. When you pee in the bucket, you have to crouch awkwardly, the cuff digging in, the chain clinking a rhythm the rats understand. They keep their distance at first, whiskers trembling at the bucket's rim, then grow brave when you do not move fast enough. You can smell other rooms. A kitchen somewhere above you smokes meat. Someone drops a ladle. A dog barks and is hushed. Someone laughs in a way that has nothing to do with you. Farther off, a bell marks a sacred hour in a chapel you will never enter. The bell is for the whole castle, cooks, grooms, steward, lord, but not for you. Time here is measured by guards' footsteps, dripping water, and the changing temperature of the stones. Your bed is straw, so old and walked in that it remembers other bodies. It crackles when you shift, and things shift inside it. Fleas with their tiny ambitions, lice with their endless work, a beetle who has mistaken you for a season. You scratch because scratching is one of the entertainments left to you. The other entertainments include counting the mortar lines you can reach, making stories about the people whose scratches mark the wall, touching the tiny cross someone carved with a nail and hoping the same stubbornness lives in you. Listening to the prisoner in the next cell breathe like a broken bellows. Learning the steps and curses of your jailer from the sound of his boots on the stair. Lying to yourself about soup. About food. Midday, if it is midday, a wooden bowl will be shoved across that breadboard. It is something brown that can support a spoon if one were provided. It smells of peas tired of being peas. If you are lucky, there is a ribbon of fat on the surface like a saint's relic. If you are unlucky, there is nothing at all because the jailer's nephew is hungry, or the steward is saving barley for soldiers and not for people who can't run. On feast days, when the great hall above glows with noise, a heel of better bread may appear. It will taste like a favor you did not earn, but will still accept because your hands are starting to shake. You learn quickly that prison is a business with customers who can't leave reviews. The jailer is your banker, shopkeeper, and weather. He smells of onions and brass keys. For a few coins, yours, your family's, your friends, he can make miracles. Fresh straw, an extra scoop of pottage, a rag to wrap the wrist where the iron rubs. For a few more, he can take a letter to someone who loves you, or pretend to. For much more, he can look away while you talk to a certain visitor through the bar at the door. For a great deal, he can whisper to the clerk when your name is read for the assizes. Mercy travels down staircases in sacks like that. The chain teaches you how to move. You sleep curled like a question mark because straightening means tugging at the cuff until you cry out. You learn how to scratch with the nail of your little finger because your other hand is tired. You learn the precise height of the bucket lip so you don't knock it over in the dark. You learn the sound of your own teeth grinding at night. At first, you think the worst part is filth. Then you learn it is waiting. Waiting is not empty, it is busy. Your mind froths at the edge like boil on soup. You remember your front door. You remember the sound your mother made when she saw the men with the writ. You remember promising to be brave and smart and both at once. You remember the face of the man who swore he saw you in the lane the night the cart went missing. You build that lane out of memory, gatepost, puddle, low hedge, the smear of the moon on water, and you walk it over and over, stopping at every step to measure how far you are from doom. Occasionally, someone passes your door and looks at you the way people look at animals they don't intend to feed. Not cruel exactly, just uninterested. A guard pauses and picks his teeth. A clerk counts 1, 2, 3, and then adds, "And the woman for the cell across from yours." A priest stops, holds up a small wooden cross through the bars, and asks if you will confess. You don't know what you would confess to. Fear? Hunger? The sin of being exactly where you are? He mutters a blessing anyway, because it's his job, and because the soul likes habits. Sometimes there's singing. Drunken, joyful, ragged. It floats down the stair and gets caught on the iron bars, tearing in a place you can't sew. You hate the song and love it. You tuck it into your ear like a hot stone and hold it against the cold inside. You hear things about other prisoners. The big man 2 doors down is said to have broken a man's jaw with a tankard. He snores like thunder and weeps like a child. The woman opposite swaps gossip with the rats and is winning. A boy in the far corner cell says he is here for debt, but carries himself like someone with a better story. This morning, you heard the jailer call him my lord without realizing he did. The rumor that someone is to be taken to the courtyard at dawn slips along the corridor like a draft, and everyone goes still when it passes. Your skin changes. The iron makes a map around your wrist, angry, red-edged lines that scab, crack, and bleed when the jailer jostles you in the doorway or when you jerk awake from nothing. Your feet grow hard, and then cold, and then numb in cycles. The flea bites turn into constellations. You can name them if you like. The goat, the spoon, the 7 sorrows. Naming things is free and makes the night shorter. You begin to understand that your cell is the castle's stomach. Everything gets ground down here. Anger, pride, smell, hope, until it all tastes the same. Above you, the Lord holds court in a room with a hearth big enough to roast an ox. Petitions, oaths, jokes, the important business of whether a certain ditch belongs to this man or that one, these are the bright parts of the day that never come down the stairs. Below, you are digested. It's not personal, it's how the place works. The jailer likes to tell stories when he's bored. They are not for you, they are for himself, and you happen to be present, which he finds convenient. He tells you he once kept a man in the bell, a cap of iron that locked over the head until the whole world was nothing but breathing your own breath. He tells you he once chained a knight who swore he would pay by Michael Fox and didn't, and then paid, but too late, and then paid again to be remembered kindly, which he was not. He tells you that men go soft under iron in surprising places. He looks at you when he says that, and then doesn't, because it's a truth that embarrasses him. On good days, and yes, even in this hole, there are degrees of badness. Someone will bring you water that isn't warm, and you will drink it in 3 long tilts, and the ache behind your eyes will unclench. On bad days, your bucket will not be the only bucket that spills, and the smell will climb your throat and sit there. On very bad days, you will hear the clatter of the rack room above, the sound of rope sliding over wood, a rhythm like rowing, and you will be grateful the chain at your wrist feels almost gentle by comparison. You tell yourself that rumor travels faster than truth. You tell yourself you are not the kind of person to be chosen for such attention. You tell yourself lies like a parent telling bedtime stories to soothe a child. It works, sometimes. You learn the rules of the keepers. Do not talk when the steward walks by. He counts silence as obedience and obedience as coin. Do not ask what day it is. That invites mockery. Do not promise your sister will bring money if your sister has sold her comb to buy a candle for the statue of Saint Leonard, patron of prisoners, because saints are patient, but gaolers are not. Do not stand when a certain guard opens the door. He kicks at knees that rise. Do not show that you are afraid of the dark, because they will teach you that you can be more afraid. Night in the cell is a long, wide animal. It settles its weight on you and listens to you breathe. You might expect it to be silent, but it isn't. The stones tick as they cool. The chain ticks as you move. Someone coughs until they don't. Somewhere, water speaks a language older than the Lord's crest. You make a bargain with the night. If it lets you sleep, you will stop counting. You fail and count anyway. You also count the ways people leave. Some go up the stairs wearing their own clothes and return with a compounded smile. the smile of a debtor who has agreed to pay more later so he can be poor now in the open air. Some go up wearing nothing but their shirt and return as barrels, a joke the porters tell when they carry a wrapped shape toward the chapel. Some go up and do not return, and the corridor remembers their footsteps for a while like a perfume. The scariest ones don't go at all. They stay until they sink, their eyes turning into stones like the ones around them. You do not want to look like that. A boy, you are sure he is a boy now, not a man, sings under his breath to stop himself from thinking. You don't know the language of his song, but you know the tune because fear has only a few of them. You hum along so quietly that only the chain hears. In the dark, it sounds like two bees agreeing that flowers will someday exist again. Sometimes a lady comes. You know she is a lady because the smell comes first. Orange peel, wax, lavender, a smell that knows carpets and polished chairs. She stops at each door and listens. She does not give alms, she gives listening, which is rarer. When she reaches yours, she turns her head like a bird, the way people do when they are trying to see past iron without letting their eyes look straight at pain. She asks your name. You tell her your name as if it belongs to both of you now. It does. She says she will pray. You say thank you in the way people say thank you to rain on a place that will never grow a garden. She moves on. Later, you watch the jailer roll his eyes and pocket the coin she left anyway, a tiny round moon winking at you as it disappears. You make friends with the square of light that visits in the afternoon. It is not large, but it is not nothing. It moves along the mortar like a snail with a job. When it reaches a certain point by your knee, you know you will be fed soon. When it reaches the scar on the wall that looks like a fish, you know the guard with the quiet boots will come. When it slips off into the corner where the stones are darkest, you feel the night starting to gather itself like a cloak. It helps to greet it. Good day, you say to the light. Good evening, you say to the dark. If someone heard you, they would consider you mad. No one hears you. They are busy or deaf to this kind of worship. You bargain with God in small ways, not for freedom, that is too big and makes both of you uncomfortable, but for a dry bowl, a kinder guard, a wrist that does not bleed today. You promise ridiculous things, a candle bigger than your own hand at Michaelmas, never to waste crusts again, to forgive the man who pointed. When the bowl arrives a shade fuller, you say thank you to the ceiling, because you have to put gratitude somewhere. There is a story scratched low near the floor, where only someone sitting cross-legged like a child would see it. A ship with 3 square sails, a flag like a tongue. The lines are careful. The hand that made them had time. You rest your forehead against the wall and sail for a while. You feel sun, wind, water that is blue rather than black. It is a wicked luxury, this imagination. You close your eyes and keep it anyway. Move, says the jailer, and kicks your straw. It is his way of saying hello. He checks the chain, not because he's afraid of you, but because his master is afraid of embarrassment. The worst sin in a castle is not cruelty, it is spectacle occurring without permission. An escaped prisoner is a very small spectacle, but it is still a public thing, and public things must be curated like tapestries. He rattles the ring in the wall with a practiced hand, listens to the complaint of the iron, and nods. Tomorrow, he says, and you want to ask, what is tomorrow, but you do not. A sighs, he adds, because he likes to both frighten and inform, and then turns away. A sighs. The word tastes like a rough turnip and a soft knife. A day when men in furred robes say other men's names loudly in a room smelling of ink and wool. A day when the castle shows its teeth gently in front of many witnesses. It means you will be led upstairs. You will blink like a mole. You will say, "I am," when your name is called, and people you have never met will say what kind of person you are. It means, perhaps, you will see the sky through something larger than a slit. It means the chain on your wrist will travel with you and explain you to everyone before you say a word. That night, you do not sleep much, not because you are terrified, though you are, but because your body is rehearsing standing up in a room full of eyes. You practice not swaying. You practice not scratching. You practice remembering how to be both person and evidence at once. The chain practices with you. It will do most of the talking. You wonder, what will happen if someone believes you? It is a dangerous thought because it arms hope and lets it run around unsupervised. You put it in a corner and tell it to stay. You count again. You tell yourself in a hushed voice about the lane and the moon on the puddle and how your feet felt at that exact moment. Wet but not cold, quick but not hunted. Your right heel stubbing on the stone near the gatepost because you were tired and not because you were guilty. You tell the story until it begins to feel like the kind of story that can stand in a room on its own. When you wake, did you sleep? Did you close your eyes and drift? There is a weight in the corridor that feels like a different weather. Keys talk to each other on a ring. Leather creaks. The guard with the quiet boots and the steward with the loud voice move like two sides of the same vow. They are here for you. Hand, says the guard, and you give him the wrong one because you are you and the morning is cruel. He takes the right one, which is already taken by iron, and snaps another bite of iron around it. The chain to the wall is traded for a chain to him. Progress. You stand. Your knees argue. Your head fills with stars. The jailer smirks, because men like you always sway on the first step. It's the rule of his little world. Up, says the steward, because he does not like to repeat himself. You climb. The stair is mean. It turns and makes you feel as if you are not going up, but into something. Your toes find the chipped edges by memory or miracle. Each landing is a small mercy, where a spider lives and knows more about the keep than any man. And then, light. It does not sweep you. It clouts you. The hall is big the way the sea is big when you have only known a bucket. People move through it like they have never counted mortar lines. Someone is carrying a tray of cups. The glint of pewter looks like treasure. The rushes on the floor whisper in a language you forgot you once spoke. Someone coughs politely. Someone laughs at the wrong time and then stops. The steward steers you like cargo to a mark on the floor where other feet have scuffed a history. You stand on that mark and wait to be a sentence. The chain teaches you the morning. You wake before the light because iron is an alarm clock that never forgets. Your wrist aches where the shackle has rubbed the same raw circle, a damp ring you could trace with your eyes closed. You shift and the chain answers with a slow, whispering clink, each link a punctuation mark in a language you're learning by necessity. While you settle into the chill and the story settles around you, do one small kindness for this candlelit corner of the internet. Tap subscribe if you enjoy these long, sleepy journeys, and drop a comment with where you're listening from. It keeps the torch lit and lets me know you're here with me in the dark. You start teaching your body the geometry of iron. There is a pattern to where the chain lies best. Over the forearm, not the wrist. Between the ankles, not across the bone. You discover how to curl your hand under your head to keep the shackle from pressing the pulse. You learn the shortest arc from sitting to standing so the chain doesn't whip and bite. Even in sleep, you bargain with metal. It allows 3 positions only: sprawled shallow on straw, perched with knees drawn to your chest, or leaning against the damp wall like a reluctant companion. Any 4th position is a bruise with a lesson attached. Time is a thing you listen for rather than see. The castle keeps its own clock, a gull's thin cry when the first gray lifts off the moat, the cook's door thundering open, the porter's cough under the gatehouse, the smith's hammer beginning its patient argument with iron. Somewhere above, a chapel bell counts the hours in a language foreign to the dungeon. Down here, you learn other measures. How the drip from the ceiling gathers on the lip of the stone and falls every 50 heartbeats. How the rats hold parliament when the passage beyond your cell goes quiet. How the draft under the door changes when the outer drawbridge shudders into place. Your day begins with a wooden bowl and a wooden face. The jailer, he prefers to be called master, slides in your portion with the flatness of someone who has forever stopped counting people as people. Pottage again. It has traveled far. Yesterday's turnip, last week's barley, something that might have been cabbage if life had been kinder. If there is bread, it is hard and defensive, not a friend. You learn to cup the bowl to warm your fingers, to tip the last thin mouthfuls with a reverence they didn't earn, to check the crust for weevils as if that's a luxury choice and not a habit you learned in one morning. What tastes better than pottage? Clean water, which is why you drink small beer instead. Not for joy, there isn't any, but for safety. The beer is weak, but it has been boiled once, and sometimes that's all the difference between tomorrow and never. If the jailer's in a mood, he lets you rinse your mouth with water from a bucket that promises little and keeps it. You don't swallow. Souls more optimistic than yours already live in there. You say thank you for the beer the way you might say thank you for rope that holds. Every prison invents its own economy. This one runs on kindness bought dear. The first purchase is a scrap of cloth to wrap around the wrist under the iron. You trade 2 spoonfuls of supper to the debtor in the next cell for a strip torn from his undershirt. Garnish, they call it in some places, the new prisoner's fee to the old hands. Here it is less tax than practical wisdom. Cloth under iron is the difference between a wound and a scar. Next, you save for tallow. Light is contraband if it isn't the jailer's. So you try for a twist of greasy wick secreted in a hollow of the wall where centuries have chafed the mortar to dust. The flame, when you dare it, is pathetic and perfect. The whole sun confined to a trembling thumbnail. You meet the others by their voices and their smells before you ever see their faces. There is the poacher whose trap caught a lord's rabbit and then a lord's temper. He tells jokes with the steadiness of someone who refuses to let the dark have the last word. There is the pilgrim who took a shortcut across a field not quantified as shortcut in the reeve's ledger. He prays for you all because it helps him sleep. There is a boy who says he is 17 and is a liar by about 4 years. He will talk to you about anything except why he's here. Their stories push under the door like drafts. The dungeon is porous to sorrow and sound, if to nothing else. Rats are part of the staff. They patrol without hurry. At first, you try to scare them off, to assert some territorial claim over the straw that pretends to be yours. Then you discover their bargain. If you give them a corner, they leave your toes alone. Occasionally, they grow bold and refute the deal. You learn to sleep with one foot tucked into the opposite knee, a little human knot that says, "Not today." Your body invents new ways of being tender and new ways of complaining. The iron makes calluses you didn't know skin could achieve. The draft gives your ear a cold that tests your patience with breathing. The straw becomes part of you, not in poetry but in practice. Little barrels of itch under every seam of the tunic. You comb them out with fingernails you try to keep from shredding. Lice are inevitabilities with faces. You break their backs with a thumbnail, a snap like punctuation, and your conscience mumbles about the creatures of God. Your conscience may file a complaint when the bucket tips, too, and the smell reminds everyone that the dungeon's only virtue is honesty. Disease is a rumor you can smell. The jail fever rides people like cheap mounts. It finds the tired, the cut, the unlucky, and it warms their skin with a false promise. One morning, the pilgrim stops praying mid-psalm and only stares. That afternoon, he sleeps through the supper, and the supper survives, untouched. By midnight, he babbles that the chapel bell is ringing underwater, and by dawn, the sound you dread the most comes. A silence that continues into other silences until even the rats adjust their routes. You shuffle a short prayer in his direction, not because you think it changes what is, but because it's something a human does when the iron makes you feel like anything but. Saying the word castle to someone who has only seen tapestries is to invite a sigh about banners and banquets. Down here, the castle is a living thing with innumerable stomachs, and you are an ulcer. It eats wood and coal and meat and gossip, and it excretes ash and shouts and orders and occasionally people. You feel the portcullis like thunder in the floor. You hear the hounds long before you smell them, fresh hay and old meat mingling into the kind of authority only animals understand. Sometimes a smell of roasting fat drifts down and makes your jaw clench until you remember the stew in your bowl and decide, with sternness, that hunger is a hobby for optimists. If the jailer is bored, you may get talk. His daughter learned to read the way ivy learns to climb stone, slowly, beautifully, and with disregard for permission. She once brought a scrap from a broken book, the corner of a psalm that had given up on its edges. She held it up from the threshold so the candlelight could claim each letter, and you watched her mouth shape the sounds like they were fruit. For a week afterward, you had something other than the chain to rehearse. You used your breath to trace the words you barely knew. And when she did not come again, you used your breath to remember how the sounds had felt in your head. There is justice, the word, and justice, the thing. The word is heavy and polished. The thing is whatever the men upstairs agree it is that morning. Sometimes the thing is a hearing that arrives like weather, unpredicted and unstoppable. You are hauled up into the presence of stones that have felt the sun and men who sit under banners painted with stories they tell about themselves. They ask you questions to which your answers appear to be decorative. They read names and insults from a parchment that looks tired of being an accusation. They are very solemn about oaths, very careful with words like mercy and order. They will mention fines, fees, and favors in the same breath. Then you are taken back down with the clear impression that something important happened and you are somehow less the subject of it than the excuse for it. On the way down, you catch a slice of sky through the stairs' arrow slit, and it is blue enough to make you suspicious. The daylight feels like a lavish lie. The damp at the bottom of the steps corrects it. Still, you carry that blue back with you. That's a secret no chain can confiscate. You practice it the way some men practice prayers. You close your eyes, and there it is again, ridiculous and true. You begin to study sound like a scholar studies ink. You can tell which guard is coming by the click of his heel on the third stair and whether he favors a knee. You can tell when the watch changes by the sigh in the key before it turns. When a cart rolls over the outer cobbles, you can tell if it's firewood or grain by the chorus of the axle. When the storm passes, you know it by the way the dripping pauses, as if the walls themselves were taking a breath. Knowledge is a kind of food. You hoard it, you share it in whispers with the boy who is 14 and stubborn about 17, and for a moment you both feel like men who know things, not things men know. The dream of escape is a candle that both warms and burns. You think about the hinge of the shackle and whether it was riveted hot or cold. You test the weakness of damp-gnawed oak around the ring set into the wall. You watch how the jailer holds the keys, on a ring, yes, but on a thong as well, and he wraps the thong twice around his wrist, which tells you the keys have been stolen before. Now and then, you imagine the stupidest possible thing, walking out. You imagine it so completely that your legs actually tingle. The iron forgets to be iron for the length of a breath, and your feet make plans without your permission. Then the chain remembers itself and lifts its voice. Every plan you have shrinks to the size of a link. When the jailer is drunk, he tells stories. He does not mean to. The wine does the speaking. He will sit on his stool and describe a tournament from his childhood. Banners like a garden in the sky, horses glistening, lances that exploded into kindling, and how the Lord's champion removed his helmet to reveal a face like a saint from a church wall. When he finishes, he looks down at you as if confused at the geography of the years. The next day, he is surly to punish you for hearing him be human. Sometimes, mercy sneaks in wearing ordinary clothes. The jailer's daughter slips you an apple gone flowery with age. It is the most luxurious texture you have ever resented. You eat it in 8 bites because 10 would be idolatry and 6 would be greed. You hand back the stem as if it were a relic. She smiles and is gone, and if she never did anything else in her life, you would still defend her name against any unkindness you ever heard. Night is not darkness. Night is variations of it. Between moon and no moon are a dozen inks, and you begin to know the weight of each. On cloudy nights, the dungeon is one shade. On clear nights, another. On nights of rain, it is wet dark, a kind of bark peeled from a tree. On nights of frost, it is hard dark that makes the iron feel like it wants to climb deeper into your skin. If you're still awake right now, breathing slow with me, do me a favor. Tap the like button and tell me in the comments one creature comfort you'd try to smuggle into this cell. A blanket? A book? A spoon with a story? Your answers help me shape the next chapter, and they help other listeners settle in too. You learn the art of talking yourself to sleep. You narrate the day backward. The droplet that fell now sitting again on the lip of stone. The last rat now becoming the first rat. The bowl now full and then taken away. The door now closed and then not yet opened. You walk yourself back to that sliver of sky in the arrow slit and tuck it into your mind where the iron can't fit. You count the chain's links with your thumb in the dark. 11 across to the ring, 3 down, 2 more to the floor. You fold your breath into smaller and smaller garments until it becomes the kind of cloth the shackle can't find. Morning will be the same. That is the proposition and the cruelty. But there is a thing iron cannot do. It cannot stop the mind from being a traveler. In the time it takes for the jailer to grind the key, you will have visited a meadow you knew once, a stream that went on saying the same thing to the same stones and never apologized for it. You will have stood in a doorway and smelled bread that needed another 5 minutes. You will have set your hand on the head of an ordinary dog who understood love in its complete grammar. The key will turn, you will return, and the chain will remember its lines. Punishments whisper from the far end of the corridor, a shout, a wheeze, the silence that means someone up there is deciding what makes a lesson and what makes an example. You try not to listen, not because you're brave, but because listening does nothing and costs much. Instead, you talk to the boy not 17 about the river by his village. He insists it has a bend shaped like a question mark. You tell him rivers are question marks that don't require answers. He laughs. The sound is new here. Even the rats pause. In the afternoons, when somewhere above you the castle is quiet enough to hear its own stone, you rehearse what you'll say if fortune finally finds you. Not to the judge, not to the Lord, to yourself. You practice saying, I was here and I kept the small rules. I shared when I could. I remembered the color of the sky. I learned the names of the sounds and honored them. I saved my breath for kindness and for counting the drops. When the iron leaves me, I will remember its lessons and carry none of its weight. The chain wakes before you do. It tightens the moment you stir, the iron bite returning to your wrist like a dog tugging its leash. You roll to ease the pressure, only to feel the stone ridge under your shoulder and the cold creep straight through the straw. There's a draft you can't locate, somewhere above, a seam of air that finds your skin every time you pretend you've gotten used to this. You haven't. No one does. Before we sink back into the dark, do me a favor so you don't miss the next descent. Tap subscribe, drop a quick watching from your city at your time in the comments, and tell me, if you had one thing smuggled in, would it be a flint, a quill, or a crust of honest bread? It keeps this sleepy caravan rolling, and it helps more people find these midnight journeys. You sort time by noises. Far above you, someone drags a bench across a flagstone floor. There's a pause, then laughter thinning into echo. That means the hall setup, which means it's sometime before the day's first stew. Then the bell, one slow bronze yawn from the chapel in the inner ward. Prime, probably, though the bell is as moody as the weather. You've learned the dungeon clock, the trickle down the wall that adds one slick tick every count of 30 breaths. If you stare at it long enough, it becomes a river. Everything down here does. Your left wrist throbs a dull red where iron kisses skin. You asked the jailer for a rag once. He smirked and brought you a handful of straw like he was giving a favor. You wrapped it anyway, and tonight it smells of old smoke and mouse. The iron ring set into the wall is slick with a white crust, niter blooming like frost. When you first arrived, you tried to pry it with your spoon. The spoon bent. The ring didn't. That was the first lesson the wall taught you. You aren't moving the wall. A shape scuttles in the straw near your ankle. You don't flinch anymore. Rats are fair roommates compared to men. This one is bold. He pauses, black bead eyes reflecting the lantern ghost that isn't there, and you whisper a bargain. Half your crust for his company. He won't keep it, but the whisper still steadies you. Go on, name him in the comments. Are we going with Sir Whisker, Captain Crumb, or my favorite, the Auditor? The best name wins nothing, but it keeps us alive down here. Keys, 3 notes on iron, climbing like a bad melody. Then boots, not in a hurry. They never are. The jailer is a man whose entire power rests in not hurrying. When your world is a ring, a staple, and a rectangle of door, you learn that speed is wealth. He has all of it. The hatch slides and the light bites your pupils. You squint at his silhouette. Water, you say. He considers this request like you've asked for a horse. There's water, he says, and nudges the bucket with his boot. He knows what's in the water because he poured it yesterday. You do too. The bucket carries a permanent halo of fur and float. You drink anyway because thirst is more honest than disgust, and because down here, every no becomes a yes eventually. That's the second lesson the dungeon taught you. Your body is a negotiator you can't overrule. Breakfast arrives. Bread like a stone, and a ladle of something that remembers peas the way old men remember summers. Weevil freckles dot the crust. You flick one off, then stop flicking. You don't have the luxury of being sentimental about insects anymore. Turn the bowl, sniff it once, take it fast. Down here, chewing is the same as thinking. Both can get you in trouble. The chain gives you exactly 5 steps in a half moon, 10 if you angle it and risk grinding the iron deeper into your wrist. The floor knows those steps. You've worn a shallow crescent into the straw where hope used to be. The wall opposite is your mirror, a damp sheen that throws back a soft outline when the torch in the passageway remembers to be generous. You study the face in it sometimes. He looks like you last week, last year, last life. Tonight, his cheeks are hollows and the beard is winning. He is not a villain. He is a person the castle forgot to turn into a story. Speaking of stories, here's one they tell in places with windows. The well-born prisoner, knight or clerk, politely captured, sleeps upstairs by the fire. swears on holy relics not to run, and eats light suppers while composing letters to his wife about hawks and honor. That happens. It just doesn't happen to you. Your crime, if it's a crime, didn't come with ransom. You are not valuable on paper. The law for older bones, the justices in ire, the circuit that cracks open jails and sorts men into piles may show up in a season or 3 if the roads are clear and the harvest is decent and no one more important requires their ink. Until then, you abide, you breathe, you practice not believing in clocks. Up above, the castle lives its comfortable day. You can tell seasons by sound. In winter, boots stamp hard, fires crackle, and you hear the cough of a man who has been breathing smoke too many years. In summer, flies become a choir, and the kitchen girls sing over the chopping blocks, tuneless and happy because their song is the only thing no one taxes. Sometimes, on feast days, a piper gets brave, and you swear the notes come down through the stone like fish through ice, bright and trembling. Your stomach tightens on those days. Joy has a smell, and it's not for you. You learned not to sleep too deeply. A body can roll the wrong way and wake to pins of iron where nerves used to be. So you do a new thing. Half sleep. You count breath in sets of 12. Pause on the 13th. Breathe again. You recite snips of psalms you half remember. Miserere mei. Just enough Latin to fool yourself into thinking you could plead benefit of clergy if it came to it. Could you recite Psalm 51 without stumbling? You rehearse anyway. You practice your I can read voice. Maybe that will matter. Maybe not. Down here, maybes are currency. You hoard them like coins. The hatch slides again. The jailer doesn't speak. A second man does. Softer voice, better boots. Not a lord, you can hear the lack of spurs, but a steward, perhaps, or a bailiff. He asks you the same questions you answered before your bones learned these stones. Where were you the night the hayrick burned? Who saw you? Why did old Martin say your name when they pulled him from the ditch? The questions are all shaped like nets. They are meant to catch 3 things: fear, contradiction, and bribes. You offer none of them. Not because you are brave, but because you have nothing left to trade, except patience. And they don't know how to price that. He brings up things you didn't do, and things you might have done had you been a different man, in a different village. He mentions the smith's daughter, carefully, like he's nudging a coal to see if it will flare. You stare past his shoulder at the torch and think about soup. He sighs. You are not useful yet. He will return when he is bored. That will be soon. Everyone above you is always bored. When they leave, they take the light with them. It bleeds under the door, becomes a line, then a dot, then nothing. Your eyes tell you the dark is absolute. Your ears betray you. There's a drip. There's a scrabble. There's the thin thread of a man sobbing 2 cells down. He came 3 nights ago and still believes in the past tense. You think of calling out. Don't. The dungeon isn't a place for advice. It's a place where you learn that silence is a blanket, and if you share it, it stops being warm. You explore your 5 steps like they are a country. Knee by knee, you survey the stone. Your fingers find the places where men before you carved with anything sharp enough to cheat the hour. Names shaved down to initials. Prayers to saints whose toes wore away under kisses upstairs. 1 notch for a day. 2 for a day you didn't cry. You try to add your own. The spoon is weak. The stone is eternal. Still, you scratch a mark, not because the wall needs your story, but because you do. Let's breathe together here, just for a few counts. Slow in, slower out, because this is where most listeners slip away to sleep. If you're still with me, type lantern in the comments so I know the brave made it to the 3rd watch. And if your eyelids are heavy, that's okay. We'll keep the chain from clinking while you drift. By the 4th day, or the 40th, dungeon math is fuzzy, your body has learned the choreography of being stuck. The cuff's edge carves a permanent half moon in your skin. You tuck the rawness under the rag like a secret. Your shoulders adopt a new slope. There's a way to lean on the ring so the pull goes into the iron and not your wrist. There's a way to sleep sitting up with your head forward so you don't choke. Your back has opinions about both. You now have a particular relationship with cramps in hamstrings. Who knew a muscle could shout? Food is predictable in an unpredictable way. Bread. Sometimes a bit of salt herring that glowers back at you from the bowl like a relic. Once, a beet. That was a festival day above, and the kitchen boy had a decent heart. You said a blessing over the beet and called it summer. You learned to drink your water when the jailer watches. Men who sip alone wind up with less tomorrow. He's in the charity business, and he collects a tax on gratitude. If you had coin hidden when they brought you in, it could buy things. An extra handful of straw, a slosh of cleaner water, a sliver of tallow pinched into a cup so you can trick your eyes into believing in stars. But coin rusts down here. Metal always does. Favor lasts longer. Once, you told a joke, and the jailer tried to hide his smile. That was worth more than silver. Store that memory in the same pocket as your name. The law lives above ground. Down here, the law is a man's patience and another man's keys. Still, you think about the other ways men in chains have crawled back into sunlight. A knight waits for ransom. His name is a purse that walks. A clerk recites his psalms and shows a branded thumb later as the price of mercy. A desperate man runs for church and abjures the realm, swears to walk to a port and vanish into an exile made of salt wind. You have none of these at the moment, but it calms your chest to arrange them like chessmen in your head. You've heard the word ordeal, and you try not to taste it. Water to test innocence? Sink, and God loves you. Float, and you are the devil's cork. Iron to test skin. Carry the heated bar 3 paces and heal miraculously within 3 days, or be what they said you were. People call these God's judgments with straight faces. Down here, you call them what they are: theater for men who can't afford lawyers. If they offer it, will you take it? Your mouth dries considering heat and water and crowds. You decide to practice standing very still instead. At some point, the smell becomes a fact rather than an argument. Ammonia, where men missed the bucket. Wet wool. Old meat. The sour of fear, which is different from sweat. If you are unlucky, someone nearby will die and you'll learn another smell. Or you won't, because you'll already know it from the roads in bad years. The castle is not a void. It is a container. You are stored here alongside other perishables, and the quartermaster of fate is sloppy with his records. When the rains come, the real months-long ones, the walls weep. Drops collect on the vaulted ceiling, then plummet big as coins and cold as truth. Your straw goes from a nest to a bog. That's when your wrists chafe raw enough to talk to you at night. Infection is a simple story. A whisper that becomes a shout, a heat you can't cool. You blow on it, clean what you can, and ask the rat to keep you company, because he listens without insisting things will be all right. He doesn't know language for that, and you respect him for it. There are mercies. Not many, but some. When the moon is full and decides to visit the slat of your hatch at the right angle, you get a scrap of clean light in your square. You hold your palm up and see your old map, lines that used to tell a fortune teller about your long life. You grin because jokes still live down here. In that moment, you remember your first teacher telling you to write your letters big and straight. You trace an A in the moonlight just to prove you remember how. News falls like dust. A guard mentions a levy of men, a raid, a rumor of a new lord. Add them together, and you can feel the castle's pulse under your hand. The baker's boy slipped on the stairs 3 days ago. The kitchen matron cursed in 3 languages. The stables ran low on oats. The chaplain misplaced a book and found it under his own sleeve. None of this matters. All of it matters. It matters because it means the world is still happening without you, which hurts. And because that means the world is still happening, which helps. A spider has taken the corner. You watch her daily because she's a craftsman, and because she uses no nails, and because her work catches gold when the torchlight does its one generous thing. A moth finds her suddenly and enthusiastically, and your heart leaps, not for the moth. You root for your neighbor now. You root for anything that makes a plan and sticks to it. At the end of a week or a winter, there's always a difference. A priest comes down. He is careful where he steps, because straw hides puddles and men hide sharpened bone. He looks at you like a man looks at a roof. Useful if it holds, a problem if it doesn't. He asks after your soul, which is kind, and your confession, which is practical. You consider telling him about the time you cut that corner of field you weren't supposed to, but that's not what they put you here for. You tell him anyway. He nods. He reminds you that saints have sat in worse holes than this and found ladders in their minds. You try to look like you own a ladder. He leaves you a small cross carved from apple wood. It smells like a market you once loved. The jailer brings something different tonight. A thin wedge of old cheese and a look you don't trust. He's softer on feast eves, or maybe he dropped it and doesn't want to bend. You share with the rat. He accepts your charity with the dignity of the titled. If you bite me, you say softly, at least make it count. Let's pause, you and me. If your jaw unclenched a little just then, that's the body remembering it was made for something besides bracing. Tell me below what you'd do first if the door opened right now. Run, eat, or look up. I read them all. I may be down here, but I'm with you. Night again. There's a new noise. Not boots. Something smaller, more careful. The hatch slides with surprising grace, and a hand snakes through with a twist of cloth. You freeze. From your cousin, a whisper says. You don't have a cousin, but you accept the parcel because names bend in the dark. Inside, a flint, 3 matches wrapped in oilcloth, and a threadbare scrap of parchment with a line, "Hold fast, market day." You swallow the paper because you can't trust pockets. Fire is hope, yes, but also risk. You hide it like you would hide a kiss. You test your chain again, not because you think it will give, but because men in chains test things. The staple groans a promise it will not keep. You angle the cuff so the pressure slides to the outside of your wrist. You count your steps. You stop at the notch you made this afternoon and tell it the weather. The wall is a better listener than most priests. It will not bless you, but it will never call you liar. Somewhere far away in the castle belly, a dog barks. Dogs know the difference between feast noise and danger noise. This bark is neither. It's bored. He's a guard who would rather be sleeping by the fire. You sympathize. You and the dog are colleagues separated by luck. Morning again. You wake because no one tells you to. The jailer is late. That is unusual, and therefore, in dungeon arithmetic, alarming. You put your ear to the wood. There's wind in the passage, a breeze that feels lively. Then you catch a new smell riding down the corridor. Smoke, but not the kitchens. Pitch, tar, torches in numbers. Boots. Many. Not marching, running. The hatch flings wide this time, and the jailer doesn't bother with ceremony. Up, he says, then laughs because where are you going to go? 2 men enter, and you recognize none of them. That's bad news. Strangers don't know which prisoners bite. They work your chain like butchers, quick and comfortable around iron. A 3rd man stands back and watches. He has a document. He looks like the law, even if he's just acting. "Gold delivery," he says, like someone just delivered a cask of ale. "By writ." He glances down the corridor. "And by expedience." The torchlight now has a heat you can feel. Maybe a storeroom caught. Maybe someone's anger did. The ring squeals, the chain loosens. For a breath so brief it's almost a memory, your arm is your own again. It feels wrong in a delicious way. You stagger. The men grip your elbows, not kindly, but functionally. The jailer does a thing you will remember until your last day. He pushes a bit of bread into your palm with the heel of his hand where no one can see. He is a cruel man in his professional hours and not entirely lost in his private ones. You put the bread in your cheek like a squirrel because you are not stupid. The corridor is a serpent of stone, and it swallows and spits you by turns until you reach stairs. Stairs? You forgot stairs were a thing. Your legs remember them in theory and protest in practice. The men haul you like you are a sack of grain gone sentimental. Your eyes smart as light grows honest. The air is air. Not perfumed, not fresh exactly, but large. It tastes like distance. Out into the lower ward, you squint at the sky. It is a bruise-blue winter morning, and a thin sun is punching above the wall walk, trying hard. Smoke tails from the east range, so there was a fire somewhere. Men shout, but not at you. For the first time in you cannot say how long, you are not the center of a room's purpose. They frog march you to the gatehouse and into a little chamber smelling of parchment and wet wool. The bailiff sits like a man who believes chairs were invented to prove he's better than you. Beside him, a clerk dips a nib and waits for a name to churn into ink. You provide yours. It feels foreign in your mouth. The bailiff reads from the writ in a voice that says he's been making a living with his throat for a while. The words wash, assize, delivery, crown, mercy, peace. Your head floats on them like a chip of bark on a mill stream. There are 2 piles on the floor. One is thick with wooden tallies and bits of ribbon, fines, fees, sureties promised by men with friends. The other pile is thinner, lengths of rope, a branding iron asleep in ash, a hood careless in a corner. You are a coin about to be tossed between those piles. "Say your piece," the bailiff says. You say the simplest one. "I'm hungry." The clerk snorts before he can stop himself. The bailiff gives you a brief, exasperated smile like he just remembered being alive. "Aren't we all?" he says. His finger taps the parchment. "Market days come. We clear the jail. We can't keep men on bread and hope forever." He looks at you in that professional way men look at storms. "Tell me something true." So you do. Not the truth that saves you. No such truth may exist, but a small one that sounds like a door when it opens. You describe the drip in the 3rd stone, and the draft near the hinge that means the latch is failing, the spider in the corner, and the name you gave the rat, the auditor, surely, and the way the bell above the hall sometimes lies by a quarter of an hour, because the boy pulling it counts too fast when he's worried. They listen, despite themselves, because truth is glue, and even officials like things that stick. The bailiff sighs again, and his ledger breathes with him. Somewhere outside, a horse stamps, and a woman laughs too loud for winter. The world is enormous and indifferent, and, at this moment, briefly arranged around your breath. We're not done, not even close, but your eyes are heavy, and the stairs were a lot. If you want me to carry you the rest of the way, through the writ, the market, the judgment, and what a man chained to a wall does when the wall finally blinks, tell me to continue, and we'll move on together. And before you drift off, hit like, subscribe, and leave a 1-line confession you'd whisper to a chapel in the dark. It can be small. Small things are how we survive. The first thing that wakes you isn't sound, it's weight. The chain at your ankle has settled differently in the night, and now it presses the bone like a cold thumb. You lift your heel just enough to unpin the ache and listen to the slow grammar of the cell, the drip in the corner counting time, the rat's soft investigatory shuffle, the big key ring on the jailer's belt chiming once far down the passage. One by one, torches come alive. Their smoke arrives at your door before the light does. While we wait for those footsteps to find you, take a breath with me. If these slow journeys into the Middle Ages help you unwind, show a little love. Tap subscribe, like the video, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Tonight's going to be quiet, close, and oddly cozy in that damp stone way. Dim the lights, settle your shoulders, and let's drift back together. You come to know mornings here by smell before sight. When the grate lifts, the air refreshes from lantern grease and wet hemp to lantern grease and wet hemp plus cabbage. The wooden bowl slides in, riding a line of ash, and bumps your toe. It's the same as yesterday. A ladle of something that has met cabbage but is not actually on speaking terms with it, a heel of bread, and the weak, sour ale that is safer than the well. Your wrists know the trick by now. Pull the chain across your lap, wedge the ring against your knee, brace the hand that shakes more against the one that shakes less, break the bread with the edge of the bowl. Every movement is a negotiation with iron. Every swallow is a decision. Beyond your wall, the castle wakes differently. In the great hall, someone beats dust from woven rushes with a rod. Hooves clatter in the outer bailey. A boy swears softly when a horseshoe clinks wrong against stone. A bell high above, chapel, not town, marks prime with 3 deliberate notes, and the staircase over your head returns it with a cold echo. You smell rosemary and wood smoke that isn't yours, and for a moment you are floating up into warm linen and bread that actually knows yeast. Then the hinge complains, a figure blocks the light, and your room returns with its simple manners. He's the morning man, the one who doesn't speak. Bucket first, then bowl, then the awkward little courtesy he does with his chin that says you aren't his business, not really. But today, he sets the bucket in the middle and hesitates. Sergeant says to shift you. 4 words in 2 breaths. His eyes point to the wall on your right. You've stared at that wall enough to know it by heart. The mortared seam where 2 masons changed hands. The pale oval stain that looks like a moon behind cloud. The iron staple half buried in lime. You've tested it with the chain before. What else is there to do? But today he kneels, spits on his thumb, and rubs until the oval lightens, then lifts. A little window you didn't know about. No, a little door swings out of the wall, and he drags your chain through. The new angle leaves you facing the door more squarely, like a dog tied shorter in the yard. He mutters, "Orders," and there's a second set of steps outside, crisp and official. They arrive 2 at once, a jailer and a clerk. The jailer you know by the way he holds keys like a priest holds a reliquary. The clerk you know by the ink-stained hem and the way his hair insists on being respectable even where it's fallen flat. He does not look you in the eye. He is already opening a parchment tube. "By writ of the sheriff," he reads, "and there are names that are not yours, titles you've never met, and phrases you have heard the way gulls hear the sea, murmured constantly, understood in outline. To be held, secure, until full examination of the cause. That means you are not going anywhere, and also that people who live upstairs are arguing about why. Do you confess?" he asks, as if he's misplaced the bridge between those clauses. Before you can answer, even to say the careful nothing that doesn't make more trouble, the jailer shifts his weight and the iron at your ankle grows thoughtful again. You are no scholar, but this is a language you understand. You may answer, but only within the length of this chain. "No, sir," you say, and because you have learned the taste of this place, you add, "Not as yet." The clerk writes that down as if it means something else. A priest will come. He leaves the parchment, not with you, with the keys man, and the 2 go the way they came, footsteps deciding nothing. The priest is not the one you expected. That one has a cough and bad patience and a way of looking at you that makes you feel you've stained the wood. This one is younger, with a careful mouth and mud on his hem. He sits cross-legged on the floor like a boy at lessons and looks at your chain, not your face. "They'll ask again," he says. "They always ask again." "Do you need me to confess?" you ask. Because sometimes that's been the bargain here. The jailer needs quiet, the clerk needs words, the priest needs sorrow. If you can portion a little of each, you sleep. He thinks too long. When he looks up, his face is the steady one you recognize from the altar. "I need your soul to be ready to leave, whether by door or by noose." He says it like weather, not like prophecy. You nod, because there's a relief in someone saying it clean. "Say the words with me then," he says, and you do. They are old words and heavy like loaves, and you pass them hand to hand, and the small door in the wall breathes cool air at your ankles. When he leaves, he palms you the crust from his pocket that the jailer pretends not to see, and it is the first kindness of the morning that tastes like kindness. You have learned the calendar by cruelty and kindness more than by bells. Kindness means the cook's boy is on. Cruelty means the sergeant with the ring that leaves our Father's prayer on cheeks. This afternoon is Middle, a scribe you have not seen, with the hungry look that men who love writing get when they are allowed to do it. He checks your fetter the way a farmer checks a gate. "These will do," he says to the jailer, about you as if you were ironwork. He slides another paper out and reads in a dutiful tone that hopes to be fair and fails. This time there are dates and distances. Your road moves beneath you on his tongue, from Muddy Lane to Market Square to here. Every place is a drop of ink. He asks you to tell him whether a certain day was a Monday or a Thursday, and you can't, because down here the day is just when they give you soup or when they forget. "Right, cannot say," he murmurs to himself, and does. And the pen doesn't so much scratch as whisper. 4 pages of your life now exist upstairs as a sheaf that smells like oak gall and sheep, and it is an odd sensation to know your days finally have a shape you can't see. The afternoon shakes out into evening. A guard you don't know sings a song you vaguely do, and it makes you like him without permission. From somewhere high, laughter, then the clink of cups, then silence. From somewhere lower, the abrupt, careful nothing that means somebody got hit. The torches gutter and are fed. Your little ankle door is closed again with deliberate mercy to keep the draft from the bone. A change comes over the stone that the body hears before the ear does. Night is a thicker coat. It's the hour when the rats become bolder. You've naming rights now. The big one is Alder because his tail looks like a peeled twig. The smaller is St. Crispin because he always arrives as the jailer's boots retreat. They are your most consistent visitors. You do not feed them. Food is a currency. But you let them be, and by their lack of fear, you measure how long you've been here. Tonight, Crispin bluntly paws the edge of your bowl, then sits, little hands folded, like a tithe payer awaiting receipt. "You and me both," you tell him, and he scrubs his face and goes about his rat. The little star is yours. You invented it 2 nights ago, when you found you needed a way to mark thoughts that couldn't be said out loud to a priest. How you are becoming a person who talks to rats. How the iron cleanliness of confessing to the wrong thing might be a relief. How sleep is the only door that opens when you want it, and even then sometimes needs coaxing. To coax it tonight, You do the counting thing. The drip in the corner ticks. You count to 60 drips, your minute, then 6 times, your hour, then back down, your prayer. Between the second and the third hour, the castle changes posture again. Somewhere above, a heavy door opens that rarely does. The little cough of the winter that hasn't quite started yet tries its throat in the passage and gives up. Then boots. Not the casual kind. 4 pairs. And the low, persuasive throat clearing of a man who doesn't often need to clear it. "Here," says your jailer, reverence in the one syllable that he has never spent on you. The bolts do their slow arithmetic. The chain stiffens. You pull your back straighter on the instinct of dozens of village afternoons when a reeve walked by. They enter all together. The sergeant with prayer ring knuckles, a knight whose face has learned to be handsome and forbidding at once, the clerk from morning, nervous as a hound around horns, and behind them a woman whose shoes do not cough against stone because they are carried by 2 boys. She is wrapped to the throat, not from modesty, but from the draft. The cloth at her wrist is so clean the firelight flinches from it. Her eyes walk the room like someone checking the quality of an ox. "Lady asks to see the wall," the knight says, "and you become furniture." They don't touch you. It is almost more disorienting than if they did. The sergeant kneels where the morning man knelt and worries the mortar with a knife. More hidden doors, little ones, the kind a mason makes when his overseer turns his back and his chisel gets curious. The jailer looks offended on behalf of the original mortaring. The clerk holds up the candle. The lady dips her face into the light, into your cold air, eyes narrowed not by disgust, but by the arithmetic of distance. "How long?" she says, and the clerk says, "Exactly 9 weeks." And the knight says, "9 weeks since indictment, my lady." And her mouth tightens in a way that says the difference matters to her. "The charter speaks to 40 days, she says softly, and looks not at you, but at the clerk, whose hair gives up its loyalty and falls a little more. "If held for debt, not crime." The knight's jaw does that little prayer it does when he is deciding how much law to politely ignore in front of nobility. You do not breathe, as if it might make a noise. You are as still as a thought held on the tip of the tongue. They confer in the language of people who make things happen with afternoons and signatures. You catch a size, sheriff's leave, appeal, and once mercy. The lady's eyes come at last to your ankle chain, not with pity, but with inventory. "Replace that ring," she says, in the tone of someone dictating the improved placement of a latch in a stable. "This one binds too close. We are not savages." It is almost comical how quickly the sergeant fumbles with keys. The new ring is not kind, it is merely less unkind. But when the iron settles, the bone is not the first thing it seeks. You exhale a gratitude you cannot spend in words. When they leave, the clerk forgets his parchment tube and returns for it alone. He pauses, half bent, listening to the stair above him like a boy listening for a parent in the hall. "They won't hang you," he says quickly, like someone setting down a plate and fleeing. "Not for that." And then he's gone, and you are left with the interesting problem of deciding whether you are suddenly warmer because the chain sits differently, or because the word "not" has kindled an ember in the middle of your chest. The next day arrives with a change of straw, a thing so rare it's a news event, and the jailer's daughter bringing it. She's right between not a child anymore and not yet allowed to say so, with wrists like reeds and hair tied back for work. She hides 2 little twigs of something green under the top layer and laughs when you find them with your fingers. "Mint," she whispers, "for your breath, if the priest makes you speak close." She's not making fun, she's being kind, which in here is the most dangerous contraband. You slip the leaves into a crack in the stone like letters. She tells you things you weren't supposed to know. The cook has a new husband who is useless but loud. One of the hounds has learned to climb stairs. The mason who did the good work in the hall broke his finger and swears God did it to make him humble. You learn in return to tell her stories that are safe for her to carry. The way Crispin the rat bows before he steals. The number of drips between prime and tierce. The shape the candle smoke makes when the sergeant lies. She begins to leave the bucket outside the door just a little longer so you can see the slivered world. And sometimes, if the corridor is empty, she tips the bowl toward you so you can see past the corridor to the doorway beyond, where the light is taller. On the 3rd day after the lady's visit, a strange gift lands on your straw. Not bread, not kindness, information. The jailer's friend, the one whose job is to pretend he doesn't like to talk, lingers and tells a story in the careful way men do when they mean you to think it is no story at all. "There's a man down in the pit," he says, as if that's the first sentence of a weather report. "Says he saw you buy iron at the smith in town." You didn't. You couldn't have afforded the smallest nail. But the pit is where stories go to ripen into truth, the way cabbage ripens into other things. "Who is he?" you ask, and he shrugs a slow, "I'm not supposed to know" shrug. He knows. "Men can be mistaken," he says with a weight on the last word that invites you to put weights on your own. "Men can also be corrected." He looks meaningfully at the chain in your hands, then at the little window the morning man showed you. "Mortar remembers," he adds, like a proverb, and leaves you with the absurd impression you've just been handed a chisel and told not to chip at anything. So you don't. But you do take inventory of every seam again, this time with the eyes the lady used. The iron staple sits in the wall like a question mark someone swallowed. You pull the chain and feel the way the shock travels. Not into the staple, which is new enough, but along a hidden bolt to somewhere deeper. You learn the weight of the link that creaks and the one that doesn't. You learn how to sit so the blood returns to your foot in a way that allows it to belong to you again. You learn that even here, you can learn. That night, the priest returns. He doesn't bring a crust this time. He brings a book. You can't read it, but you can see from his face that he has. He reads to you, not scripture yet, but the part before the scripture where someone explains why the words are about to be arranged as they are. It's about confession and the difference between truth and truth-shaped convenience. It is about how, if you confess to escape the rope, you still have to escape the part inside you that knows you lied. He closes it softly, like someone finishing a small, careful meal. If they ask again, he says, say the truth, even if it is the more difficult road. Hard roads go somewhere, easy ones only end. He says it as if he has had to walk one. You ask him then about ordeals, The old proofs you've heard about, iron and water. And he shakes his head. Less and less, he says, since the council. Sometimes they still do water in the villages when they think no one is looking. But here, no. Now they like parchment. They say a confession is cleaner than a burned hand. He looks at your wrist. At the scab, the iron keeps writing the same sentence on, and does not say the words he doesn't need to. Days become their own season. There is the day of mint, the day of new straw, the day of visitors, the day of measured silence. Your stomach learns to be grateful in advance, so that when gratitude is late, your body can loan you patience. The castle, obligingly, supplies small entertainments. A mason's hammer that finds a rhythm like a familiar song. A dropped bucket that rolls like a wheeled saint down the corridor and ends against your threshold with a shy thump. A cat whose kingdom is the staircase and whose throne is the warmest step. She looks at you like a colleague from another department and cleans one paw with legal thoroughness. You get used to your own smell the way sailors do, by making it a story you tell yourself about being a person who lives at sea. When it rains, and it must because the draft tastes different, a sweetness wakes in the stone that makes you believe, briefly and without proof, that somewhere outside something is green. And then the day comes for the pit man. This is not told to you. You know it by the way the guards practice ignorance too patiently. The priest does not come. The sergeant with the prayer ring hums through his nose in a little way he has when he is thinking about being somewhere else. The knight's spurs mark the hall like fence posts. They bring someone past your door. You do not see him. You see his shirt. You see his hands. People in the pit do not have hands like that, soft-bellied hands, overfed. He is not a pit man. He is a man who went down there briefly to make the coming up count more. He stalls at your threshold like a horse at a shadow, and tries to push air back through his nose as if it is a door. The clerk reads his statement for him. The man nods at the correct nodding points. Yes, he saw you at the smithy on that day that may have been a Monday. Yes, you had iron. Yes, you spoke with men who were later found with it. No, you did not pay. The nods are neat. The clerk works like a tailor, fitting words to a garment. The knight lets it be made, then looks the man up and down with a soldier's exactness. He is not impressed with the cut. You will swear to it? He says, and the man says yes too quickly, like a child offered a question on which he will be praised for any answer. Then swear, the knight says, and the priest appears as if he has been waiting in the wall, and the man places his soft hand on the book, and his lips do the correct shapes. The words wander around the room like flies. You watch them with the same patient disgust. When he finishes, the knight says nothing at all. The clerk's pen makes a fat, satisfied noise. The jailer does what keys do. The man leaves lighter by one fear, heavier by one lie. Later, much later, when light has become an idea and footsteps have become a rumor, you feel something under your fingers in the straw. Not mint, not kindness, not rat, a nail. Not new, bent into a hook by use or by an impatient wall. You don't hold your breath. You put it in your mouth and hold it with your tongue, so the involuntary hiss your body wants to let go has somewhere to go. Then you tuck it into the little pocket of the stone where the mint once slept, and sleep comes and pats your shoulder like a tired friend. If you've stayed with me this far, you're doing beautifully. Let your jaw unclench. Let the shoulders fall heavy for a moment. If you're still awake, say hi in the comments and tell me your favorite tiny detail so far. The mint, the cat, the priest's book. And if you nodded off and are catching this in the morning, tell me where the dream took you. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because tomorrow, the day after the nail, the day after the oath in the hall, brings the thing you didn't expect. Not freedom, not yet, a bench. They bring it on two shoulders, a simple plank with two holes like a face that forgot its mouth. The jailer says, "Orders." And for once you have learned enough of the dialect of orders to shrug with him. They fit it across your lap, iron rising like an unwelcome tide, and fasten your wrists through the holes. The chain becomes a geometry problem your body has to solve anew. It leaves you looking forward now, not at your hands or your feet or the corner where drips live, but at the door. "Why?" you ask, and the sergeant smiles without malice. "You talk in your sleep," he says. "Do you? You don't know. Sleep here is more a boarding house than a home. It takes you, but it doesn't take your name. Maybe last night some word escaped you and went running into the passage like a child. Maybe the nail worked, not at iron, but at the part of you that decides which words stay in and which go out. Maybe someone, awake in the dark in the next cell over, heard you and lent your words to another man's oath. You feel your throat warm with an anger you can't afford to heat. You let it go. You keep the nail. A bench changes your day. It makes the bowl sit differently. It scrapes your knees. It complicates kindness. It turns the little window's draft into a gust that lifts the hair on your hands. The priest shakes his head when he sees it, but says nothing. The girl with the straw eyes it as if it might have been a boy she used to know. The cat sits on it once, briefly, as if to bless or approve, and then departs with the regal air of one who will not be associated with poor furniture. You adapt, because that is the one thing a human does better than stone. You learn to eat with your face closer to the bowl. You learn to sleep with your wrists crossed like a corpse in a picture. You learn to pull breath in under the iron like someone borrowing from a neighbor and promising to pay it back. You learn that if you hold yourself very still, the rats will climb your ankle like a new piece of scenery, and in their tiny feet there is something like trust. And then, one blue-edged morning, the kind that sharpens the smoke and makes every sound wear its best clothes, the night returns with the lady. This time, there are no papers. This time, there is just her face, paler than clean cloth, and his jaw making prayers. "You will be moved," she says. She says it as if she knows the word itself is both a mercy and a cruelty. The assize rides in. They will want your body where the law can see it. She means to the town jail, to where people like you become a day in the market with an ending. You nod as if you have a choice about being a noun. "Take the bench off," she adds, sharply enough that the sergeant is surprised into speed. The iron leaves your wrists with a sound like lips unsealing from a bowl. The skin underneath looks like someone else's, pale where it used to be you. You flex. The blood returns as 100 bees coming home. As they turn to go, the lady looks once, finally, into your face. If there is anything there, you cannot read it. But she does something you did not know people could still do in rooms like this. She takes a little breath through her nose, as if to smell the place the way one might smell a kitchen. And when she makes her face again, it is softer. "Bring warm cloths," she says. "There is no need for suffering that does not serve." She is wrong about that. The world is made mostly of suffering that does not serve. But it is a pretty thought, and you tuck it away with the nail and the mint leaves and the priest's book. They move you at twilight when the courtyard is busy with people who don't want to watch but might. The ankle ring becomes a chain between two men. The world becomes a series of distances negotiated in iron. The girl with the straw is at a window, hair in a ribbon she doesn't wear when she works. She lifts 2 fingers at you, then folds them in as if she has been told not to. The cat licks her paw on step 3 as if nothing in the world is of the slightest concern except one piece of dirt. At the gate, the sky is so large you want to drink it. Air goes into your lungs as if they are old bellows being asked to be useful again. The town below the castle does not know your name and does not care to. It smells of meat and people and the river. The men who carry your chain are neither cruel nor kind. They are weather. And you, who once had a life that did not include this iron, who had a bed that was not the shape of stone, who knew what day it was because of the sun and not because of the sound of a bucket, tonight you are a lesson being walked across a bridge. It is not a lesson for you. It is for someone's son who will see and pretend not to. It is for the butcher's boy who will sell your wasted meat's cousin tomorrow. It is for the baker who will cross himself without thinking when you pass. You will be hung on a hook of an afternoon if a clerk's pen decides to, or released by supper if a lady's patience does. And you have room in your chest for both truths, because in this place you have become an expert at holding 2 pains in one hand. The torch down the corridor gutters again, licking the stone like it's tasting the night. You feel it before you see it, the faint tremor along the chain, the iron hum that travels into your wrist and bones. Breathe slow. Let your eyes adjust to that small, smoky circle of light. You're still here. The wall is still here. And the wall, as ever, is winning. If this quiet, slow-burn journey through the past is your kind of nightcap, tuck in with us. Tap subscribe, drop a sleepy comment telling me where you're watching from, and share a little good night for our brave wrists. That kind of support keeps these midnight histories going, just like in the sample script you liked. The stone at your back is a lesson in patience. In the torch glow, the blocks aren't gray. They're a dozen shy colors of damp. Green where the moss creeps, white where salt has crystallized, black where smoke has combed every year into the mortar. When you lean closer, the surface tells you everything your guards won't. Scratches, names carved with nails, pins, teeth. Prayers in short Latin stems, miserere. A rough little fish for Christ. A crude hand tally counting off days until the marks suddenly stop. You trace the cuts with your fingertip, the way a tired mind follows wood grain. And it's like shaking the hands of the people who were here before you, all of them trying to make time notice them back. The chain holds the time for you. It's a calendar that weighs 2 pounds and never forgets. By now, you can feel the whole space through metal. The steps on the stair when Nicholas the jailer comes with the bucket. The thud when Hoogs, who snores like a millstone, rolls against his own ring. The thin drag of a rat's tail in straw 6 feet away. Your skin has adapted like a second sight. When the iron cools, you know it's past midnight. When your cuff warms, the cook fires have been stoked upstairs. You don't need a bell to know when the cannons are chanting prime. You have a bracelet that sings a schedule. Inside that schedule, there's commerce. Everything costs something down here. Fresh straw, 2 farthings if you have it, or a promise you'll never be allowed to keep. A scrap of linen to line the cuff and stop the skin from breaking. That's a kindness the jailer sells for a kindness later. Your sister toting in a heel of bread, perhaps, or a message carried to the reeve. There's even a price for where they fasten you. Closer to the candle means closer to the gnats in summer. Closer to the door means closer to the draft in winter. And the middle, rarely empty, costs whom you know. The currency is not just coin. It's information. It's gossip. It's being the one who heard which knight fell out of favor and which merchant keeps a quiet key in his purse for friends in trouble. You learn to make the wall your shelf. A wedge of bread sits on a flat stone, the last man smoothed with his palm. Your cup, wooden, swollen by so many rinses it stays damp for hours, nests in a crack shaped exactly like a cup. Your spoon goes into a hole that smells faintly of tallow. This is domestic life, chained to a wall. Everything has one place, and you get very good at finding that place by feel. Your other hand, the free one, has become a map. By morning, you can unload and reload your small kingdom in darkness. It's the closest thing to control you get. Up above, life is as loud as a fair day. Hooves hammer the outer bailey. Barrels bang in the buttery like drums. A boy sings while sweeping rushes, and the tune filters down in ribbons you can't quite catch. You lie still and feel the castle living like a sleeping beast, exhaling smoke into your air, dripping fat through cracks you cannot reach. The worst nights are feast nights. That's when the floor sweats ale and laughter falls through the ceiling like coins you will never spend. On those nights, you count the breaths between the roaring and imagine each cheer as a footstep walking toward the stairs with your name in its mouth. And because this is sleep history, and because the living always need a little ritual, let's plant a soft one here. If you've made it this far with the chain humming under your skin, tell me in the comments where you'd hide a key if you had one. In your sleeve? In the straw? Stitched into your cap? It sounds silly, but asking is all the jailbreak we're allowed. Weather keeps its own court down here. In winter, the stone goes bone cold and never quite warms, no matter how many bodies share it. Your breath ghosts in the torchlight. Your toes cramp from being wet too long, and you learn to flex them without moving your ankle enough to tug the shackle. In summer, the moat speaks in gnats and a sweet rot that curls through cracks. The heat is a slow punishment. Everything smells like someone else's breath. On some nights of storm, the ones that lift the thatch and make the keep creak like a ship, the water comes up. You hear it first, the clever lapping at steps. Then you feel it, cold around your heel, then ankle, then shin. On those nights, your world shrinks to the space between your nose and water, and you rise on your toes until your calves burn and your chain is finally taut as a bowstring. If you were not awake before, you are now. You will sleep later. That is the rule of flooded nights. Rats know the high places and will use you as one. A bold one might climb your tunic to your shoulder, a slick press of fur and hunger. You tolerate it because you know what they're escaping. You endure because you can. When the water drains, it leaves behind a new topography of straw, islands, ridges, small continents of mold. You will tidy them tomorrow with the toe of your shoe, sweeping the damp to a corner the sunrise never visits. Disease does not rise like water, not visibly, not at first. It moves in coughs, then in silences where a cough should be. Gall fever, they whisper, jail air, bad air. The wise ones sit with their mouths closed, as if the next breath could be a decision. The wise ones get sick just the same. When Hughes stops snoring, you notice. When he doesn't ask for his turn on the bucket, you notice. When Nicholas comes with 2 men instead of 1, and they say, "God rest him," like they're tapping ash from a pipe, you notice most of all. The dead are light. Their chains are heavy. The sound the iron makes on the stair is private. No one talks while it rings higher and higher. They will say prayers for him at louds. You will listen. And because sound travels in this place like a rumor, you'll hear the chapel when the priest's voice is kind. And you'll know it's the chaplain and not the confessor. The chaplain says the psalms as if God might be sleeping, and it would be rude to wake him. Sometimes he visits. He stands just far enough away from the straw that his boots will not stain, and talks to you through the iron with gentle questions. Do you need anything? Yes, Father. Daylight. Could you use anything? Yes, Father. My mother's voice. He will fold your answers into an absolution no one can take away from you. He'll hand you a scrap of wax with a saint's name pressed into it. You will thumb it thin, worrying it smooth like a river stone, until the saint's face is gone and the prayer has been worn into your own skin. Justice travels slower than disease. The king's men ride circuits, assizes they call them in later centuries, and the castle will host them when the season and the border and the politics are right. Until then, you wait. You learn these rhythms from a man 3 rings down whose cousin once waited out a war on a writ that said soon. He explains the market of mercy like a counting rhyme. If you are common and poor, your case sails where the sheriff's favor blows. If you are common and wealthy, the breeze improves. If you are noble and poor, the law remembers and forgets you in turns. If you are noble and wealthy, the law wears a smile and asks how much. Some are held for ransom not because they are guilty, but because they are valuable. Some are held for debt not because they are wicked, but because someone needs the lesson to travel. Here and there, the old ways persist. The watery ordeal in back valleys, the clumsy combat no one wants in the king's sight anymore. But most of the time, it's parchment and seal and oaths, and neighbors swearing that you are or are not the sort of person who would do the sort of thing they say you did. You can hear the future upstairs in the hall when scribes sharpen pens. They make a papery sound like mice in dry grass. You make a sound like a man staying very still. If you're still with me, take a slow breath and check your shoulders. They've crept up while you were listening, haven't they? Let them drop. And if you're awake enough to type, whisper it to the comments. Iron sings. It's a simple check-in we can use to find each other in the dark. Meals arrive when they arrive. Down here, breakfast is just morning. It might be pottage, it might be a heel of yesterday's bread dipped in yesterday's ale. It might be nothing at all and the promise of something later. A feast day sometimes brings a mercy that tastes like meat. The church pushes extra loaves through kitchens like a mother palming candy into a child's hand. On those days, you eat slowly, not because you are polite, but because your mouth is not used to the idea of pleasure. The jailer's cat will come and sit exactly out of reach, perfectly aware of your range and the chain's length. Cats are practical theologians. They believe in what is reachable and make peace with what is not. There are rules to survive the hours. 1. Keep your feet dry when you can. 2. Keep your skin whole when you can. 3. Keep your voice quiet when someone else needs quiet. 4. Counting is a form of prayer, and prayer is a form of counting. Use whichever version helps. 5. Mend what you can, including yourself. You tear a strip from your hem and bind the wrist. You roll your tunic and make a pillow. You comb your hair with your fingers because that's what there is. Your nails will grow. You will file them on the stone, carefully, so you do not cut yourself in your sleep and salt the wound with the iron you cannot avoid. Night carries a different kind of traffic. Dice click in the guard room. A story reaches you in pieces about a boy who climbed the mill wheel and kissed a girl and fell. The baker laughs in a way that tells you he has known flour for 20 years. A minstrel stumbles past, late and unneeded, and practices a verse under his breath to keep the rhymes from escaping. The castle is a village stacked on a hill, and you have the worst address, but at least you have the neighbors. Hugh's replacement coughs softly, and then, embarrassed by the sound, coughs louder. A woman somewhere sings to a baby whose cradle is made of rope and will never fall. The wall gives you a job. Watchman without a watch. Make sure the world keeps happening. Notice the small things. You inventory the torch supply by scent alone. You can tell when they've shifted from pine pitch to tallow dust. You can tell the new guard by his boots. They squeak, which means money, which means he will be proud and wary and extra fond of rules for 3 days. You can tell the old guard by the way he greets the cat before he looks at you. You can tell when the lord of the castle is home because the kitchen hums 2 octaves higher, and the stable smells like freshly combed horses, and someone runs up the passageway, always late, always with a platter that's too hot. When messages come, they come like weather, never when you expect them, and always all at once. A sister's ring wrapped in cloth because seeing it will keep you from spending it. A word from the reeve that your boundary ditch has held through the rain. A rumor that the justiciar himself has been seen 3 castles south, and that his clerks have hands like spiders, quick, long, careful with webs. On the best day, there's a slip of wax and parchment that says, "Your bail is set," and all you need are 12 neighbors to swear an oath on your character in a church you cannot reach. It might as well say, "Fetch the moon." So you practice your only craft, waiting well. You stretch your hands and forearms against the pull, as if training for some race that never fires a starting arrow. You press your shoulder blades flat to the stone so the muscles between them won't knot. You take your sleet in handfuls, 10 minutes here, 20 there, letting the torch sputter its lullaby and the chain tell you exactly where you begin and end. When dreams come, they are practical. Walking to a well, measuring a rope, cutting bread with a knife that never dulls. Your mind keeps the kindest pantry. Some nights, rare as clear moons, Nicholas swaps a story for silence. He leans on the door, anonymous in the halo of his lamp, and tells you about the time a pilgrim got lost in the marsh and slept in a hollow oak and woke up to find a new world where the birds did not fear him. He does not tell you his sorrows, but his voice has learned the shape of them. He stays 5 minutes longer than he needs to. That's a saint's work in a place like this. Not miracles, just minutes. There's a superstition about walls. If you talk to them kindly, they will keep their chalk and lime from getting into your lungs. So you say good night to the stone under your hand. You thank it for being predictable. You promise not to push hard enough to crack it, because you've learned that cracking stone only cracks you. You make peace with tomorrow's weight tonight, because that is how wrists survive. And because engagement is how late-night stories survive too, if you're drifting but still here, let's seal it with something small. Type, "I hear the chapel," if you can hear the priest's voice at the edge of this room. It's a strange, comforting roll call. Little lights in the dark, yours among them. There will be a day soon when the circuit riders arrive and the castle is a parish of paperwork. Hall benches lined with neighbors in their Sunday brown, the steward in a good cloak, the sheriff measuring out his courtesy as if it were spice. You'll be turned loose from the ring long enough to stand, legs arguing at the novelty, and climb those steps you've counted with your ears 100 times. The hall will smell like beeswax and ink. Sun, full and unapologetic, will strike your face as if it has been waiting to do it for months. A clerk will say your name without looking up. You'll swear to tell the truth because truth is cheaper than a lie that needs feeding. And for a few minutes, the chain will hang slack at your side like a dog that is off duty. But that is later. For now, the torch quivers and dies with a small ribbon of smoke, and the next one takes its place. Your cuff is warm again. Nicholas has his keys. The cat settles where straw is driest. Hugh's replacement has stopped coughing. The chapel hums a psalm about mercy that sounds, in this stone, like water finding its level. You count to 100. Then to 100 again, not to measure time, but to give your mind a soft hill to walk over until sleep is ready. The chain has its own weather, cold when you wake, clammy by noon, hot where metal presses skin, and always slightly damp, like a fog that decided to live on your ankle. It sounds as if it were breathing, little clicks with each shift of your foot, a longer scrape when you stand an inch toward the bucket, a dull thud when the cuff hits bone because you misjudged the length again. You've learned that if you twist your leg just so, you can steal 1 extra inch toward the slit of light under the door. That inch is your morning. No one here announces the hour. The bell does it for them. Somewhere far above your stone ceiling, 3 long peals that shake a thread of dust from the mortar seam over your face. You close one eye so the grit doesn't land in both at once. A good day is when the dust tastes like old lime and not like the latrine trench. A very good day is when the spider that lives behind the ring bolt has woven something new for you to count. You've become an expert in counting things no one else sees. The jagged chip on the third flagstone from the door. 4 triangular bites edged in iron. The tally marks some earlier soul stabbed into the wall with a nail. 1 cluster of 13, then a space, then 7, then a longer space, then a cluster that stops halfway through. You count to keep your mind from doing the other kind of counting. Measures of regret, measures of distance to the scaffold. The chain shifts on your ankle, and the cuff's bite says, "Stay where you are." If you are housebred or literate, you might try to make a ladder out of your thoughts. You name every month you remember, every saint whose feast brings meat to the upper hall, each lane and pond in the village whose name you have not said aloud since the guard first snapped the shackle closed. If you are not literate, you make ladders from hands. Your father's, calloused, too big for the cups he made from his palms when he drank. Your mother's, blue-veined and sweet-bread warm. Your own, grimy, sore-knuckled, nails black with mortar. The ladders lead nowhere, but they give you something to climb until the slot in the door slides open and your day enters in a wooden bowl. Pottage again. Gray, with a thin sheen of grease that trembles at the surface, like it's not quite sure it should be there. You tilt the bowl and watch the grease run to one side, then the other. You pretend it's the sea. You roll a crumb of bread in it and pretend it's one of those fat merchant cogs that stops at the quay below to unload sacks that smell like faraway afternoons. When the bread comes to shore at your mouth, it is gritty and sour. You don't complain. Complaint is a currency the jailer will take and never give change for. You have learned his ways. He likes his jokes met halfway with a small laugh that keeps him from inventing a new game that involves your knuckles and the door. He does not like the slow kind of pleading. It takes too much time. But he will accept a quick favor. 2 of your best words spoken plainly if it means he can add your candle stub to the pile of things he resells to the person who sleeps where you sleep when you are gone. He is not cruel so much as he is paid by opportunity. You have learned to tuck your thanks into the place where your breath warms the cuff, because no one can take a thank you they do not hear. A rat considers you from the dark. You consider it back. It is a small treaty you renew each morning. You do not startle when it runs along the wall. It does not test the tender part of your foot while you sleep. You've set aside a scrap for it because you've discovered something terrible and useful. If the rat eats, it stays. If it stays, the cat stays. If the cat stays, the smell of the cell across the passage lessens because the cat keeps the smaller lives from making more smaller lives. Nothing here is clean. You simply rearrange filth into better patterns. The chain hums when you rub a bit of stew fat into the sore beneath the iron. You do this with reverence, as if the act were prayer and the grease a relic. The iron does not care about reverence, but the skin does. It loosens under your fingers. For a moment, the cuff sits gentle, like a ring that once fit in spring when your hands were thinner. Footsteps in the stair. Leather on stone. A small cough. The pause that means someone is counting keys. You have learned every pause. This one is the scribe's. He is thin and careful with ink, the way you are careful with breath. If the steward above cares to prove he is fair, the scribe comes to prove it on parchment. He clears his throat at your door, as if to remove your voice from his, what the law calls separating the person from the statement. He does not look directly at the chain. No one who is free looks directly at another person's chain. The scribe reads slowly with that churchy roundness that turns a sentence into a sort of bell. He says your name wrong. It takes your mind a long moment to find your own name in his mouth. When you do, you nod. He writes in notation that you nodded. He reads the statement they took the night you arrived, how the reeve found you, what the witness said he saw, what the steward believed the witness meant, what the steward decided to do with the belief. On another day, if your lord were in better temper or your enemy less good at smiling, the scribe might have used another sheet. Not today. He asks if you will mark the page. You are tempted to draw a little ship instead of a cross. Crosses cannot carry anyone anywhere. Ships at least pretend. But ink and pretense both belong to him. So you make a mark that is not your cross and not your name, and is an ugly bridge between the two. He blows gently on the page, and in that little breath you hear the river that runs between you and anything that could be called a future. When he's gone, you keep listening. After the scribe, sometimes there is a priest. He smells of wax and old wool and something green, like the inside of a book. He sits where the scribe stood and does nothing with parchment. He speaks like your mother did on the nights fever ran hot in your little brother. He calls you my child, and you do not push the word away, because in here, anything you can be is a thing you can survive. He does not ask about the chain. He asks what you remember of mercy. He says that even bristling men hang their swords on pegs when they come into heaven. You try to imagine a room with pegs so strong. If you're listening to this in the dark, maybe under your own blanket, and this slow, grim drift through a castle's underbelly somehow comforts you, make sure you've tapped subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and the time on your clock. It's strange, but it helps, this little roll call across miles. Keep the lights low, breathe easy. We'll keep the same sleepy, sardonic walk through the past you asked for. And yes, I'll be right here when you close your eyes. By afternoon, the stone has warm thoughts in it. If you press your cheek to the flag, you can feel them. Leftover heat from the kitchens. The sun translated through 60 feet of wall. A cook's anger when the pot refused to boil. Laughter that happened on the other side of a door you're not allowed to pass. Warmth has to travel here like gossip. Roundabout, whispered, no names. Some days they take you to the yard. It isn't a yard the way farmers mean the word. It's a rough trapezoid of cobbles inside a taller square of wall, and it isn't yours. But there is sky, and your heart, clever little animal, still recognizes it. The iron has a traveling cuff that bolts to a ring sunk into the yard's rim. You walk in a circle, and the chain follows. And the circle is so small you have to decide whether the left foot gets to be outside or the right. You trade off to be fair to your own bones. In the yard, time reveals itself in other shapes. Smoke from the smithy, straight when there is no wind, kinked when there is. The banner on the keep, sag, then ripple, then sag again. If the banner ripples twice in quick succession, the gatehouse is doing practice with the portcullis again. The clash is comforting. It means there is a world in which things still rise and fall on purpose. You keep your eyes away from the other chained ones, not because you are cruel, but because seeing makes it worse. There is a boy whose wrist bones are just now learning what iron teaches. His mouth has the damp, open look of someone who once slept on a hearthrug and still thinks warmth is a right. There is a man with the sort of beard a winter breeds, coarse, gray, noble in a way he is not. His chain is the heavier kind, the one they use for bodies that once wore silk. He is here for ransom. He stands like furniture from another room. The guards treat him like a bundle, valuable, fussy, not to be dropped. He nods to you once as if to say, "We are both objects." And it is a terrible and lovely moment, because he has seen you. You have seen the pits. Not a storybook oubliette with a trapdoor and dramatic gasps, just slots in the floor with rotting wood lids that used to fit and now bully their way into the hole when a boot heel hits them. You're chained to a wall, which means someone thought you still knew how to be vertical. Pits are for people the castle wants to forget faster. Sometimes at night, you imagine the word forget is a creature, slow and fat, grazing on names. You feel it grazing at the door. You breathe very softly so it doesn't hear your name being said by your own mind. The law, if it can be called that here, moves in seasons. In harvest, no one comes to judge because men are busy with what truly matters, bringing grain inside. In deep winter, the roads decide who sees the inside of a hall. You learn strange phrases from the guards and traders who find their way down the stair. Jail delivery, ire, assize. Words like wagons with wheels you'll never touch. You learn that justice travels in a company of damp cloaks and writing boxes and stops at markets to eat sausage while people peer at it with that particular hunger humans reserve for spectacle. You learn that sometimes the court dies of the prison before prisoners die of the court. Jail fever, the steward calls it when he thinks no one down here knows Latin. The scribe calls it, "We will sit outside this season." You call it silence in the passage and bread that does not run out so quickly. There are rules for this place, never written, always enforced. Do not tug the chain at shift change. New guards do not like to be reminded they have keys. Do not hand a rat your last crust when the jailer is near. Charity is considered a kind of theft here, and he prefers to own all favors. Do hide your tallies. Hope is the one contraband they will beat you for. A man who hopes is a man who has not yet been sorted into the convenient categories: pleading, useful, finished. At night, the castle dreams above you, not loudly. A thud where the kitchen boys rolled a barrel wrong. A thin cry that could be a baby or a cat or the edge of a votive cup hitting stone. Boots like punctuation along the ward. A laugh that does not belong to anyone you know. A gust under the door that smells of wet leather and dogs and old wine. You make a stew of those sounds and sip it slow and pretend it warms you. When your mind tries to go up into rooms you'll never see, you call it back with your fingers. Count the links, touch the wall, the spider's thread, the bowl, the cuff. Your body keeps you in place with inventory. Sometimes there is questioning. Not the public kind with benches and witnesses, the priest watching and the steward pleased, but the other kind, with rope and hoist and the odd logic that says pain tells truth better than you do. They call it putting to the question, as if it were a ceremony. The pulley complains, you do your best not to. Later, when the chain goes back around your ankle, it feels like a favor. You teach yourself to cherish absurdities. You survive by becoming the sort of person who thanks iron for being less clever than rope. The seasons move even down here. In summer, the stone sweats and your skin breaks into stubborn, itchy maps. In autumn, the guard who likes pears drops a core by the door. You coax the seed from it like a pale pearl and tuck it into a crack by the window slit that is not in any measurable way a window. In winter, the iron eats through whatever fat you put beneath it, and your ankle looks like a thing a mason chiseled with poor tools. Come spring, the world above you goes mad for mud. A boy brings it in on his boots and leaves 2 perfect prints by the step. You cry because they look like the field behind your father's house. You barter, not with coin. Coin is a language this place understands too well. You barter with memory. You tell the guard a joke from a saint's day 2 winters ago, and he brings you a heel with raisins in it. You offer to teach the boy who brings the bowls how to scratch letters into soft mortar with a splinter. He gives you the stub of a candle and, seditiously, a bit of tallow to coax its courage. He is all shoulders and knees and questions. He wants to know what it feels like to be chained. You tell him the truth, but quietly, without the words that would get you beaten. It feels like someone else is wearing your foot badly. He nods, and in his nod is the smallest, hardest thing in this place, pity that does not condescend. If you are very unlucky, someone from your life above will come. They will stand just back from the door because the air says no, and their eyes will not know how to look at you because they love you, and the chain occupies the space where love wants to stand. They will bring a loaf and a small parcel of herbs and a story about the neighbor's cow, because this is what people do when death is impolite enough to take its time. Feed you and talk about cows. They will say your name as if introducing you to yourself. You will step to the end of the chain and feel it decide you have gone as far as you're allowed to go. Then they will leave with their hands empty, and that will be the longest moment you have yet lived. If you are very lucky, a letter arrives. Not to you. Letters do not belong to people like you, but to the steward about you. The boy with the questions watches him read it, his lips moving just a little at the hard words. He tucks it into the sleeve he uses for important things, then sends for ink. Ransom if you were born to money. Pardon if your lord wants you back to dig the ditch you dug wrong. Exchange if you are a piece in a game being played with a different table than the one you ever ate at. In that rarest weather, you will feel the chain cease to be biography and become only object. Your ankle will still be a ring of angry flesh. The cuff will still weigh what it weighs. But the iron will no longer be a sentence. It will be one thing removed from you and about to be removed again. You will learn how hard it is to let go of something that has defined you. Freedom, when it appears, always feels too big at first. Between such weathers, there is the ordinary miracle of still being here. You keep a calendar of smells. On baking days, the whole passage is sweet and mean with barley crust and the burnt sugar of apples that shouldn't have been trusted that long. On slaughter days, iron in the air, a dog's hoarse joy somewhere in the yard, men's voices made big by meat. On washing days, lie and tired laughter, and a fierce sense that the world, at least up there, has edges that can be scrubbed. You also keep a calendar of small mercies. The guard who, without remark, left your ankle washed when you could not lift the bowl. The priest who told you that absolution is not a ladder but a soft chair, and you are allowed to sit in it. The rat that died in his sleep and not under your foot. The spider who survived your clumsy hand and went on weaving as if the damage were just wet. There are stories here, traded like bread. One says a man picked his chain lock with a fish bone and made it to the stables and would have been a crown's gallop away if he had not stopped to look at the stars and remember all their names. Another says a woman sang so steadily and in such a small voice that the jailer, who could not bear monotony, let her go 2 hours a day just to quiet the tune. She never came back after the 7th. A third says there is a tunnel under the east wall that the masons left on purpose to embarrass the steward should he ever become proud. The guards laugh, but with their mouths tight. Pride gets everyone here eventually. There are rules outside, too, that affect you in ways that feel like weather. The king you cannot see needs coin you will never touch, so the steward who can see you counts you twice for the roll and once for the purse. The baron across the river has quarreled with the abbot who owns the field you stole cabbages from, so your cabbage is now a kind of banner and the chain a kind of sermon. You learn that almost nothing is ever about what it says it is about, except hunger. Even kings admit that word. You learn how to sleep sitting up because the chain says so. You teach your shoulder to be a pillow and your own breath to be lullaby. This is the boring history people above you like to forget. That most of life in the old stones was waiting for a court, a letter, a birth, a thaw, a harvest, a messenger, a mood to change. What makes the chronicles glitter is what makes the hours here heavy. Men with power doing sudden things. You are not sudden. You are ongoing. If you've made it this far with me, breathing softer now, brows unfurrowed, tap the like, leave a comment with the single item you'd keep if you found yourself in a cell like this. Straw pillow? Candle stub? A song? I love seeing your thoughts. They steer what we explore next, and oddly, make these stones feel less alone. And if you know someone who finds comfort in slow history, share this with them. Let's build a small, quiet ward of our own. Near evening, a horn in the yard calls men to their bread and their complaints. The scribe's steps retreat. The boy's questions are done for the day. The spider patrols the ring bolt with the self-importance of a small god. The chain feels heavier, not because iron changes, but because daylight leaves and your body likes light more than it admits. Someone above laughs too loudly at a joke that wasn't very good. It swings down the stair and arrives at your door like a late visitor. You receive it because you receive everything now. You lean back against the wall and let the stone take some of the weight. The cuff has chafed a neat, ugly ring. The grease you saved for it has gone hard in the cold. You crumble it between finger and thumb and make a small balm. The ankle says thank you. You say nothing, because there is no need. In the quiet that follows, you realize you've learned the castle's secret. It runs on thousands of tiny bargains, and you have become a skilled bargainer. Tomorrow, the steward says through the guard, there will be movement. The justices traveling with the weather have sent word. The hall will be aired and the benches set, the parchment stacked and the ink warmed under a lamp. With that, your cell is suddenly full of two new smells, hope and fear, and you cannot separate them. You clean your fingers on your shirt the way you saw your father do next to the plow, as if the next thing you touch should be touched with care. Above, they test the portcullis again. 2 ripples, then the clatter. The chain hums when you swallow. You close your eyes and see the road you have not walked in months and the faces that made it home. You open them and see stone and iron and a bowl and a spider and a rat and the scratch you made with a splinter that, if you squint, looks like a ship. The night has thinned to that blue-gray hour when the torch by the stair gutters low, and the cold climbs your chain like a patient animal. You don't wake so much as rise to the surface. Same straw, same stones, same iron ring kissing your wrist. A drip counts the seconds somewhere you can't reach. That's the whole problem of a castle prison. Everything you need is always 3 paces beyond your chain. Before the key turns and the day begins, a quick moment housekeeping. If these slow walks through the Middle Ages help you unwind, tap subscribe. Leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is, and tell me which detail stood out tonight. It genuinely helps this sleepy little channel keep the candles lit. The guard above coughs, then mutters. Boots, then a creak. You know them now by sound. First, the porter with the limp, heel, toe, scrape. Then the turnkey, who clears his throat like he's scolding the air. The castle wakes in stacked layers you've mapped with your ears. Kitchen fires catching, harness buckles chattering in the stable yard, a sleepy hawk complaining in the mews. Your world is the circle you can pace, and whatever drifts down it. You make your rounds anyway. 4 steps to the damp patch, 5 back to the wall. Kneel, palm flat to stone, feel where last night's spill ran and dried. This is how you measure time when no one tells it to you. You chew the last corner of yesterday's bread slowly enough to convince your empty stomach it was a meal. Bread here isn't bread as you knew it. It's a gray, heavy coin paid out by a jailer who likes to hear his own ring of keys. Sometimes there's a whisper of fennel from the cook's knife. Mostly there's chaff and grit. You work each bite until it stops being hard. Above, the castle is already busy doing things you can only half remember. Counting rents, hammering boot nails, moving barrels from the buttery to the hall. Every so often, the life you recognize crosses your threshold as a smell. Hot fat, new cut oak, horse. Once, unbelievably, a hint of rosemary. You laughed then, couldn't help it, laughed like a fool at a plant. That's when you learned how much a single leaf can remind you that the world includes gardens. You've become, without trying, a patient of the walls. You study their medicine, where the green mildew grows in cold weather, the way the mortar powder dries pale in a rising wind. You know which stone sweats first on a warm day, which mice are bold enough to take crumbs from your palm if you keep your hand still. Which spider's web shivers when the stair door opens 2 flights up? The castle is a living thing with a slow pulse. You've learned to rest your head against it like a hand on a sleeping dog's flank. The turnkey arrives with the bucket and the daily proverb he means as a joke. Bread and water keeps devils softer, he says, as if he's thought of it just now. He watches your face for a flinch he can count as sport. You don't give it to him. He leaves the bucket, takes the old one, and drips a little water on your chain, just because he can. Power is a puddle. He steps in it. You sip anyway. It's cold, clean enough, and it's yours. The first drink of the morning is always heavier than it looks. Someone above decided how much you get today, and you have to make the decision obey. The trick you found, imagine each mouthful is a place you could visit. Meadow, brook, hollow in a tree after hard rain. You swallow like you're walking. The bailiff came yesterday, and that's why you slept shallow. He stood with his list and his little frown, adding you up to see whether you were worth any man's notice. That's all justice is here, mostly arithmetic. Are you worth the trouble to try, to find, to sell back to your kin? If your name sits on land, even poor land, you'll see paroles and letters and men in caps. If your name sits on nothing, you see the inside of bowls and the backs of boots. Once in a while, the world throws a line to someone like you anyway. A merchant who wants to be seen as merciful, a guildmaster who knew your father's uncle, a reeve with a debt he can pay in paperwork rather than coin. You didn't blink much when the bailiff looked you over. Eyes give away more than mouths. You let him believe whatever he was measuring could be measured that way. He asked questions that had nothing to do with your charge. Can you write your name? Do you have a wife who can bake tolerable bread? How many teeth? He asked it like he was shopping for a mule. It takes practice to let a man treat you like a plow and not find something sharp to say back. You kept your answers short enough to sound humble and long enough to sound useful. It's a narrow road, and irony is a ditch. When he left, the turnkey leaned in with the news like a cat brings a mouse. Might be moved, he said. It could mean anything. To a better cell, to a worse one, to the hall for an official word, to the far gate for the thin walk with a noose at the end. You turned your mind away from that last picture, the way you'd turn a horse from a hole in the road. Your mind would look if you let it. You fed it a different picture. A door. Daylight. Your hand lifted. Iron off. It's a dangerous thing, imagining the lock turned the right way. But it's also a living thing, and you need those more than you need sense in a place like this. The morning wears on. The drip keeps time. Your shoulders ache in the familiar groove where iron has taught your body its shape. You stretch into the chain's limit and back, slow like tide. A rat comes up bold as a tax collector, sniffing for crumbs, and you shoo it away with your breath. It blinks, offended, then disappears into a crack you can't see. There are guides to this place who will never speak to you. Footsteps. The wrong ones for the bucket, the right ones for something else. These are boots you barely know, polished, cautious, a little proud. 2 men. The first carries authority like a cloak. The second carries an inkhorn. The doorway fills with wool and leather and the faint memory of lavender. That last scent tells you everything. Someone whose hands are softened by soap, not rope. "You," the one with the ink says, as if there were a crowd to sift you from. You stand. Your chain answers for you. They don't step in. No one likes to cross into another man's circle of iron. Even the powerful feel it. The old superstition that misfortune is a draft that can move from body to body if you stand too near. The clerk reads. The words are dry as oats. A pledge from someone you left behind. A fee promised. A surety. Terms that sound like the planks of a bridge. You stand on each one with your weight before you trust it. "What do you say?" the clerk asks. It's oddly generous, considering your say has never mattered much. You say nothing first, just to hear the room without your voice in it. Then you nod. Slow, not eager. Eager looks guilty. Slow looks solid. The turnkey arrives as if summoned by the word release whispered 2 rooms away. He always looks put upon when a prisoner departs on anything but his say-so. He fishes for the right key, a small theater he enjoys too much, then finds it and takes your wrist without looking at your face. The iron answers, again, not with a click. There is never a click. That would be too kind a sound. But a tired sigh, as if the shackle were a glove that didn't fit well on either of you. It falls away, lighter than you'd imagined. The stiffness that remains is your body arguing with memory. You rub the mark not to soothe it, but to make sure it's no longer a circle that closes. The clerk watches, pretending not to. The man with authority watches, not pretending at all. He's measuring how you hold yourself when you're no longer a thing on a chain. Men who have power over bodies like to see the moment their power stops being a fact and starts being a story. "Come," he says. You do. The chain drags behind once, out of habit, then stops when it remembers it's no longer invited. Up the stairs. Each step is a lesson in gravity. How much you took it for granted when someone else determined where you could stand. The door at the landing is the sun's rough draft, bright, blocked, promising. When it opens, you learn again what color is. It's not the green of a garden painting, it's the green of breath. Your eyes water because eyes are ancient and believe brightness means danger. You let them water. No one here will think less of you for watering, even soldiers blink. The yard is a place you knew and a place you've never stood. Men cross with intent. A dog drills a hole in the earth with its nose and decides the news it finds there is acceptable. Women move with pails that steam. A cooper taps a hoop down onto a stubborn barrel. Above, a banner lifts and flattens and lifts again in a wind that tastes of river. You take a step and are shocked to discover that walking is loud. Chains train you to be quiet. Freedom makes you noisy. Boot on stone, breath in throat, sleeve on sleeve. It's a clumsy kind of joy. They lead you not to the gate, but to a side door by the steward's office. You learn the rest of your new arithmetic there. The fee is paid, but not fully. The release is real, but conditional. You will return on market day to stand where they place you and say what they ask and sign with your mark if you cannot write your name. You will not leave the shire. You will keep the peace, which is another way of saying you will not be seen. It's more than you hoped for and less than you wanted. That's the tune of this century. The turnkey hands you what he calls your bundle, which is to say a shirt that remembered being white a year ago, and a strip of leather you can argue into a belt. He reminds you of the rule that says a man who leaves the keep leaves clean. Hands washed, hair trimmed, the worst stink beaten out with a switch. You stand while the laundress appraises you like a stool she's not sure can be saved. "Soap," she says to nobody, and soap arrives. It has bay in it. Your skin doesn't know what kindness is for a minute and tries to crawl away from it. Then it takes the lesson. She gives you back to yourself, towel damp and ordinary, which feels extravagant. The clerk returns with a quill and a question. "Your mark?" he asks. You tell him. He nods, pleased with the shape. It's clear, honest, not showy. There's a way a mark can tell people more than a signature sometimes. A man with a proud X is a man you watch. A man with a careful hatch, one stroke set gently across the other, is a man who will pay you back in small coins and on time. When all that can be signed is signed, and all that can be warned is warned, they walk you to the postern and let the wind finish the work. Outside, the road is just a road, mud and ruts and the hoof quiet of a gelding half asleep. But the ditch has cow parsley in it, and the hedges have sparrows, and those two facts are enough to make your knees consider their options. You stand there longer than anyone thinks you should. The turnkey lingers, curious whether you'll run like a dog off a chain or stand like a mule who's forgotten he can move. You don't give him either picture. You step out the way a man steps off a ferry, grateful, steady, surprised to find the shore holds. The first thing you do is nothing dramatic. You don't shout, you don't fall on your knees. You sit on a flat stone by the road and take off your shoe to shake out the straw that's been traveling with you. It springs away, full of tiny decisions of its own. You put your shoe back on and lace it more carefully than you've laced anything. Then, because you can, you close your eyes. When you open them again, the castle looks smaller. That's a trick of light and distance. It's also a trick of power. Places shrink when they stop holding you. If you've made it this far with me, take a second to nudge the like button so this story reaches more sleepy travelers. And tell me in the comments, what's the first small thing you'd do if a door like that opened for you? Wash your face in a cold stream? Stand under a tree? Warm your hands on a loaf not baked by a jailer? I read those answers, and they shape where we wander next. You walk. Not far at first. Your body hasn't forgotten the weight it carried. The road reminds you that the world is uneven in a friendlier way than dungeon floors. Your shoulder loosens. Your breath stretches its legs. A cart passes, and the carter nods the way countrymen nod when they don't know your story and don't care to. A dog decides you are boring and claims to have known that all along. On the right, a field waits for the daily argument between weeds and wheat. On the left, a pond hosts a committee of geese so self-important they squeal at their own reflections. In the next village, everything is outrageous. Children's laughter, a broom's rasp on a threshold, a woman bargaining for onions with a kind of cheerful ferocity that would make a lord trip over his sword. You sit near the oven's warm corner at the bakehouse door and ask if there is work worth a meal. The answer is always the same. Yes, if your hands know what a broom is for, and you can carry without complaining. You carry. You don't complain. You learn, by the way flour settles on your knuckles, how many loaves are coming out next, and whether you'll be allowed the heel as a wage. This is the thing they never put in romances about prisons. If luck tosses you back, the first taste of freedom is not wine, it's work. And work is a kind of benediction. Night brings its own arithmetic again, but it's different outside stone. You measure not drips, but crickets, not the footfalls of a jailer, but the soft thud of a door closing 2 houses away. Someone sings. It's not a beautiful voice, and it doesn't have to be. You sleep on straw you chose, under a roof that leaks in only one spot and not on your face. And for an absurd hour, your heart wakes you because it cannot believe it's allowed to beat without asking permission. If your story had bent another way, this might have been the part where you stand in the hall and hear words that mean the road stopped for good. That happened more often than not. A petty theft could be a death if the wrong man wanted to make a lesson. A brawl could be a fine, a hand, an exile, depending on who counted and who was watching. Jail fever killed more than rope did. Ransom was a miracle that mostly visited people whose names had roofs. There's no romantic moral here, only the blunt truth medieval walls lived by. Fortune had a favorite, and it wasn't you. But tonight we end on the road, because sometimes that happened too. Sometimes a guild brother paid. Sometimes a sister sold a dowry ribbon for a stamp on a paper. Sometimes a reeve had a generous day. Sometimes the clerk liked your careful hatch. We live in the sum of small mercies. What do you carry away? The chain's mark will fade. The habit of counting will not. You'll still press your palm to stone in any new room to listen for the building's pulse. You'll still pace 4 steps and back without meaning to when you're waiting for anything. A loaf to bake, a child to finish a story, a storm to decide whether it wants to be a storm. You'll never again think of bread as a thing that arrives without having to speak to it. You'll walk by the castle from time to time because the road requires it. You'll look up not in hatred, but in recognition. It's a machine for keeping and for reminding. It kept you. It reminded you. Now it can go back to being other people's problem. And when winter comes, and it will, with its black fingers and its stingy light, you'll find the old habits useful. A man who can map a room by sound has a better chance when the snow says travel is canceled. A woman who can slice a loaf into 6 honest shares can keep peace in a house with little. A person who can make a game of drip counting can herd impatient children through the plague of any age, waiting. There's one last thing to do. You will go stand near water. Not for drama, for calibration. A stream is the opposite of a cell. Constant motion you don't control and don't need to. You kneel on the bank and look into it until it stops looking like a mirror and starts looking like a road. Then you let the cold take your wrists where the iron lived and tell the skin a different story. You don't forgive anything. You don't curse anything either. You just agree with the current. And for the first time in too long, you don't measure it. If you drifted off somewhere in the straw and woke up here, welcome back. If you're still with me all the way to this last fire's ember, thank you. I hope the stone cooled under your hand, the door opened, and the road felt steady. If you want more slow, honest histories told like this, where we keep the romance low, the detail high, and the tone gentle, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next sleepy journey. Drop a comment with the word chain so I know you made it to the end. Tell me where in the world you're listening and what time your watch says. It's my favorite roll call, a quiet room full of faraway clocks. Tonight we close the door on the keep and walk out like we belong on the road, because we do. In a century that loved locks and circles, there were still paths. There still are. Good night. Breathe. And if the drip starts counting again in your room, let it count. You know how to wait it out.